My stepdad, Mike, caught me sneaking pics online for cash, his glare icy. I flipped it, teased him to zip it before Mom knew. She was clueless at work while we tangled in secret. One night, it blew up edgy, electric. What he confessed as I fled? Yo fled. I was hunched over my laptop in my room in Billings, Montana, the screen glowing with a half-edited photo of me in nothing but a towel, ready to upload for cash, when the door flew open and hit the wall hard. My stepdad, Mike, a 52-year-old programmer who never leaves the house because of his remote coding gigs, stood there, his face red, eyes wide, staring at the screen like he'd just caught me robbing a bank. It was past midnight, and Mom was out on her night shift at the vet clinic, stitching up some poor dog, so I thought I had the place to myself. I slammed the laptop shut, heart pounding, and tried to play it off, saying it was just a dumb project, but he stepped in, shut the door behind him, and said he wasn't born yesterday. He'd seen the thumbnails, the payment tabs, he knew exactly what I was doing. I stood up, still in my oversized hoodie and shorts, and told him to chill, that it wasn't a big deal, just a side hustle to pay for college stuff. He crossed his arms, leaned against my desk, and said selling pictures like that wasn't a hustle, it was trouble, and Mom would lose it if she found out. His voice was low, sharp, like he was already picturing the fight that'd blow up this house. I could have begged him to keep quiet, but something snapped in me. I didn't want him holding this over me. So I stepped closer, looked him dead in the eye, and said maybe we could work something out, just between us. He blinked, caught off guard, and didn't move. The air got tight, and I pushed it further, leaning against the bed frame, crossing my arms to mirror him, and asked what it'd take for him to forget what he saw. He shifted, uncrossed his arms, and said I didn't know what I was starting, but his eyes flicked down my frame, quick, like he couldn't help it. I smirked, said I was a fast learner, and he rubbed his jaw, muttering that this wasn't a game. I didn't back off, told him I wasn't asking for permission, just a deal. He stepped closer, towering over me, and said I was walking a dangerous line, but he didn't leave. My pulse raced, and I could tell his was too. Then his phone buzzed on the desk, some late-night work alert about a server crash, and he grabbed it, breaking the stare down. I used the moment to sit on the bed, legs crossed, watching him fumble with the screen, and said he didn't have to decide right now. He shot me a look, half angry, half something else, and said we'd talk tomorrow, then walked out, leaving the door cracked. I sat there, adrenaline pumping, knowing I'd just lit a match I couldn't put out. Hey, you all listening, ever dig yourself a hole you can't climb out of? That was me, right then, betting on a bluff. I heard him pacing downstairs after, probably trying to figure out how to handle me, and I reopened the laptop, not uploading anything, just staring at the screen. The house was silent except for his footsteps, and I knew he wasn't telling Mom, not yet. But I'd planted something, and it was already growing. Tomorrow, I'd push it further, because if he thought he could control me with this, he was dead wrong. I woke up late the next morning, sunlight slicing through the blinds, my head still buzzing from the standoff with Mike the night before. I dragged myself downstairs, barefoot, and found him out on the back porch, sitting in a rickety wooden chair with a mug of coffee steaming in his hand. Mom was gone, already at the vet clinic for another night shift, and the house felt too big, too empty. He didn't look up when I stepped outside, just kept staring at the patchy yard, cigarette smoke curling from the ashtray next to him. I grabbed a soda from the outdoor cooler, popped it open loud enough to make him flinch, and sat on the steps, watching him out of the corner of my eye. He finally spoke, voice rough, saying we needed to talk about last night. I took a sip, let the silence hang, then said there wasn't much to talk about. He saw what he saw, and now it was up to him what happened next. He set the mug down hard, turned to face me, and said he wasn't here to play babysitter, but he couldn't just ignore it either. I shrugged, leaned back on my elbows, and told him he didn't have to ignore it, he could just keep it to himself. His jaw tightened, and he stubbed out the cigarette, saying Mom would kick me out if she knew. I stood up, walked over to the railing near him, and said maybe she didn't need to know, leaning in just enough to make it a question. He didn't move, but his eyes narrowed, tracking me. I pushed it, stepping closer, resting my hand on the chair arm next to his, and said I wasn't asking for a lecture, just a little understanding. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and said I was testing him, his tone flat but shaky underneath. I smiled, said maybe I was, and asked what he'd do about it. He stood up fast, towering over me again, and said I didn't get how messy this could get. I didn't flinch, told him I liked messy, and he could too if he stopped acting like a saint. His hand twitched, like he wanted to grab something, but he shoved it in his pocket instead, staring me down. The moment stretched, thick and heavy, and I turned the dial up, brushing past him to grab his coffee mug, taking a sip like it was mine. He watched, didn't stop me, and I handed it back, my fingers grazing his, slow on purpose. He took it, knuckles white around the handle, and said I was making this harder than it needed to be. I laughed, said he was the one making it hard, and sat back on the steps, stretching out my legs, letting him stew. He stayed standing, looking at me like he was trying to solve a bug in his code, and I knew I had him hooked. Then the neighbor's kid rode by on a bike, yelling about some lost ball, and Mike turned away, muttering about bad timing. I used the break to stand, stepping close again, and said we weren't done talking, he'd see me around. He shot back that I was trouble, and I grinned, saying he had no idea, then walked inside, leaving him on the porch. I heard him light another cigarette as the door swung shut, and I knew he wasn't running to Mom yet. This was mine to play now, and I wasn't backing off. By mid-afternoon, Mike was holed up in his home office, a cramped room off the hallway stacked with monitors, cables, and empty energy drink cans. I'd been pacing the house, restless, when he called out for me to bring him a spare USB drive from the kitchen drawer. I grabbed it, walked in, and found him hunched over his desk, debugging some glitch for a client, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The blinds were half open, letting in slants of light, and I dropped the drive next to him, leaning against the desk edge, close enough that my knee brushed his chair. He glanced up, said thanks, and told me to stick around in case he needed something else. I smirked, said I wasn't his assistant, but stayed anyway, watching him work. I picked up a tangled mess of cables from a box by his feet, untangling them slow, and asked how he liked sitting in here all day. He grunted, said it paid the bills, and kept typing, but I caught him sneaking looks at me every few seconds. I held up a cord, asked if he needed it, and when he reached for it, I pulled it back, teasing that he'd have to earn it. He stopped typing, leaned back in his chair, and said I was pushing buttons I shouldn't. I stepped closer, dangling the cable over his lap, and said maybe I liked the reaction. His hand shot out, grabbed the cord, and his fingers brushed mine, lingering longer than they needed to. He didn't let go right away, and neither did I. The room got quiet, just the hum of his computer, and I slid onto the edge of the desk, my legs swinging near his, asking if he ever got tired of playing it safe. He looked up, eyes locked on mine, and said I was the one playing risky games. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the desk, close enough that my hair fell near his shoulder, and told him he could join me if he wanted. He shifted in his chair, his knee bumping mine, and said I didn't know what I was asking for. I laughed, said I knew exactly what I was doing, and he gripped the armrests, knuckles tight, staring at me like he was about to snap. Then the doorbell rang, a delivery guy dropping off a package of tech gear Mike had ordered. I hopped off the desk, said I'd get it, and walked out, feeling his eyes on my back. The guy handed me a box, asked if Mike was around, and I said he was busy, signing for it quick. He squinted past me into the house, like he'd heard something, and I shut the door fast, heart thudding. I carried the box back, dropped it by Mike's chair, and said he owed me one for covering. He took it, his hand brushing my arm as he pulled it closer, and muttered that I was too good at this. I grinned, said he hadn't seen anything yet, and leaned against the doorway, watching him unpack. He plugged in a new router, hands steady but quick, and I stepped back in, asking if he'd thought about my offer from last night. He paused, looked up, and said he'd thought about nothing else, his voice low. I crossed my arms, said good, and told him to let me know when he figured it out. He shook his head, half smiling, and went back to his screen, but I could tell I'd rattled him. I left him there, the tension still crackling, knowing I was winning this round. That evening, I decided to up the stakes while Mom was still out on her night shift at the vet clinic, stitching up cats and dogs until dawn. I dragged a folding table out to the back veranda, threw a checkered cloth over it, and set up a spread, grilled chicken from the deli, a bottle of cheap red wine, and 2 mismatched glasses. Mike wandered out from his office, drawn by the clatter, his eyebrows shooting up when he saw the setup. I told him to sit, said I figured he deserved a break from staring at code all day, and poured him a glass, sliding it across the table. He hesitated, then dropped into the chair opposite me, saying I didn't have to do this. I shrugged, said I wanted to, and took a sip from my own glass, watching him over the rim. He cut into the chicken, took a bite, and said it wasn't bad, asking where I'd learned to play hostess. I leaned back, stretching my legs under the table until my foot nudged his, and said I picked up a few tricks online, same place I learned my other hustle. He stopped chewing, set his fork down, and said I wasn't letting that go, was I? I smiled, topped off his wine, and told him I didn't see why I should. He hadn't either. He took a long drink, his eyes on me, and said I was making it real hard to think straight. I slid my chair closer, resting my elbow on the table, and said maybe he didn't need to think so much. The night air was cool, crickets chirping, and I reached over, adjusting the plate in front of him, my hand brushing his wrist slow and deliberate. He didn't pull away, just watched, and said I was trouble in ways he hadn't signed up for. I laughed, said he could handle it, and poured more wine, letting my fingers graze his as I handed him the glass. He took it, his grip tight, and leaned forward, saying I was playing a hell of a game. I tilted my head, my knee bumping his under the table, and told him I wasn't playing alone, he was right there with me. His breath hitched, and he shifted closer, the space between us shrinking fast. Then the neighbor's lawnmower roared to life next door, a loud, grinding buzz that snapped us out of it. Mike jerked back, cursing under his breath, and I stood up, grabbing the empty chicken container, saying I'd clean up. He nodded, still holding the glass, and said we'd finish this talk later. I smirked, told him I'd hold him to that, and carried the stuff inside, leaving him on the veranda. The mower kept going, and I peeked through the window, saw him down the rest of his wine in one gulp, staring at where I'd been. Hey, you all out there, ever feel the ground shift under you mid-step? That's where I had him, teetering on the edge. I stacked the dishes in the sink, adrenaline still pumping, and heard him come back inside, the door creaking shut. He didn't say anything, just walked past to his office, but I caught the look he threw me, half warning, half something else. I knew I'd turned the heat up, and he wasn't backing out yet. The night wasn't over, and I wasn't done pushing. The next day dragged into late afternoon, and I found Mike out in the backyard shed, knee-deep in a pile of dusty cardboard boxes he'd been meaning to sort for months. Mom was still asleep after her night shift at the vet clinic, the house quiet except for the occasional creak of the shed's wooden floor. I stepped inside, the air thick with the smell of old paper and motor oil, and saw him tugging at a taped-up box, his sleeves rolled up, sweat beading on his neck. I asked what he was looking for, and he said some old manuals he'd promised a coworker, waving me over to help. I grabbed a box cutter from the workbench, sliced one open, and started pulling out stacks of yellowed tech books, tossing them into a pile. He crouched next to me, digging through another box, and said I was handy to have around, his tone light but edged. I smirked, handed him a manual, letting my fingers brush his arm as I pulled back, and said I had my uses. He paused, looked at me, and said I was full of surprises, too many, maybe. I shifted closer, kneeling on the floor, my shoulder bumping his, and told him he hadn't seen the half of it. He set the book down, turned to face me, and said I was making it tough to focus on anything else. I leaned in, resting my hand on the box between us, and said he didn't seem to mind too much. His eyes darkened, and he didn't move away. I stood up, brushing dust off my jeans, and stepped behind him, reaching over his shoulder to grab another box, my chest grazing his back on purpose. He stiffened, turned his head just enough to look at me, and said I needed to quit while I was ahead. I laughed, said I wasn't ahead yet, and pressed closer, my hand sliding down to rest on his shoulders, light but firm. He stood fast, spinning around, and grabbed my wrists, holding them between us, his grip tight but shaky. He said I was driving him up a wall, his voice low, rough, and I twisted free, stepping back into him so our bodies were flush, telling him he could push back anytime. He didn't, just stood there, breathing hard, hands hovering like he didn't know where to put them. Then his phone lit up on the workbench, a video call from his coworker, the ringtone blaring through the shed. I jumped back, heart slamming, and he lunged for it, hitting decline, cursing about bad timing. He turned to me, said that was too close, and I nodded, stepping away, saying we'd have to be quicker next time. He rubbed his face, muttered that I was insane, and started stacking the manuals again, but his hands weren't steady. I grabbed a broom, swept some dust into a corner, and said I'd leave him to it, for now. He shot me a look, half exhausted, half hooked, and I walked out, leaving the shed door open. I hit the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and downed it, still feeling the heat from his grip. He stayed out there a while, and when he came back in, he didn't say a word, just walked past me to his office, carrying the manuals. I knew I'd pushed him further than ever, and he wasn't pulling the plug. We were barreling toward something, and it was getting harder to stop. It was well past midnight a few nights later, and the house was silent. Mom still out on her shift at the vet clinic, probably elbow deep in some emergency surgery. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing from the shed incident, so I padded downstairs in a tank top and shorts. The living room dark except for the faint blue glow from the TV Mike had left on. He was there, sprawled on the couch, one arm slung over the back, a half-empty glass of whiskey on the coffee table next to a crumpled bag of pretzels. He didn't hear me at first, eyes fixed on some muted action flick, but when I stepped into the light, he sat up fast, spilling a pretzel onto the cushion, and asked why I was still up. I said I could ask him the same, crossing the room slow, and dropped onto the armchair across from him, pulling my legs up under me. He grabbed the remote, turned the volume up a notch, and said he couldn't wind down after work, too many deadlines. I nodded, leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, and said he looked like he needed a distraction. He shot me a look, took a sip of whiskey, and said I was already distracting him plenty. I smirked, stood up, and walked to the table, grabbing a pretzel from the bag, popping it in my mouth while he watched. I said maybe that wasn't a bad thing, and he set the glass down, leaning back, his legs stretching out so his foot nudged the edge of my chair. He didn't say anything, just kept staring, and I felt the air shift, heavy and slow. I moved closer, stepping around the table, and perched on the armrest of the couch, my thigh brushing his shoulder as I settled. He tensed, looked up at me, and said I was getting bold. I shrugged, said I'd been bold for weeks, and slid down onto the cushion next to him, close enough that our arms pressed together. He didn't pull away, just shifted so his hand rested on the back of the couch again, fingers inches from my neck, and said I was asking for something he wasn't sure he could give. I turned, facing him, my knee bumping his hip, and told him I wasn't asking for anything he didn't want to offer. His jaw clenched, and he reached for the whiskey, but I grabbed it first, holding it out of reach, saying he'd had enough. He lunged forward, playful but firm, trying to snag the glass, and I twisted away, laughing, ending up half across his lap, the glass still in my hand. He froze, hands hovering over my waist, and said I was killing him, his voice rougher than before. I slid off slow, setting the glass down, and stayed close, my legs tangled with his, saying he was still breathing last I checked. He gripped the cushion, knuckles white, and said I didn't get how close this was getting. I leaned in, my shoulder against his chest, and said I got it fine, he was the one stalling. His hand moved, brushing my arm, then settled on my thigh, light but deliberate, and I didn't stop him. I shifted, swinging one leg over so I was straddling his lap, knees digging into the couch, hands braced on his shoulders. He sucked in a breath, hand sliding to my hips, gripping tight, and said my name, low, like a warning. I tilted forward, my hair falling around us, and told him he could say stop any time. He didn't. His fingers dug in, pulling me closer, and I rocked forward, feeling his chest rise fast under my palms. Hey, you all out there, this is it, the moment it all boils over, right? We stayed locked like that, my hand sliding down to his collar, his thumbs tracing circles on my hips, the tension so thick I could barely think. He pushed up slightly, shifting me back, and stood, pulling me with him so we were chest to chest, his hands still on me, mine fisting his shirt. He said I was insane, and I said he liked it, stepping into him so he backed against the wall, my body pinning his. His hands roamed up my sides, slow, testing, and I pressed harder, feeling him tense, his breath hot against my ear. I slid my hands up his chest, fingers curling into his shoulders, and he groaned, low, pushing back just enough to flip us so my back hit the wall, his arms caging me in. We were tangled, electric, every move a dare, and I arched into him, his hands dropping to my waist again, pulling me flush. He leaned in close, forehead almost touching mine, and said we couldn't keep doing this. I said we already were. His grip tightened, sliding me along the wall, and I hooked a leg around his, locking us tighter, my hands gripping his arms. He moved one hand up, brushing my hair back, then down to my neck, resting there, his thumb grazing my jaw, and I tilted my head, daring him further. We rocked together, slow, deliberate, his other hand sliding under my shirt to my lower back, skin on skin, and I gasped, pushing into him harder. He pulled me off the wall, spinning us back to the couch, and I landed on his lap again, straddling him, hands in his hair, tugging just enough to make him grunt. The room spun, every touch dragging us deeper, and I shifted, grinding down, feeling him respond, his hands roaming my back, pulling me in until there was no space left. He said my name again, desperate now, and I leaned back, hands on his chest, saying he could end it. He didn't. I slid off, stood, pulled him up with me, and backed him toward the stairs, his hands still on my hips, guiding me. We hit the bottom step, and he pushed me against the railing, his body pinning mine, hands sliding up my arms, pinning them over my head. I arched up, chest to chest, and he pressed harder, every move slow, deliberate, teetering on the edge. Then headlights flashed through the window and Mom's car rolling into the driveway. I yanked free, heart exploding, and bolted halfway up the stairs, whispering for him to move. He stumbled back, cursing, grabbing the whiskey glass like it'd save him, and I hit my room, slamming the door as the front lock clicked. I leaned against it, chest heaving, knowing I'd gone too far to turn back. The next morning, I packed a duffel, told them I was crashing with a friend, and left, spilling this mess online because I can't hold it in anymore. What he said when I walked out, you'll never believe it.